So I'm Bonnie Yates. I was lucky enough to meet John Hall. He was introduced by a mutual acquaintance, and within 5 minutes of him walking into my office, I just had kind of like an aha experience, because I think, as you'll see today, when you listen to John talk about his life, the fact that we're asking the question, am I still autistic, is kind of silly. I mean, John is the most amazing person, and you're going to get to know him today. I've been interested in the question of recovery for years, since I have my own grown son now who had a diagnosis of autism. And after I met John, it gave me just this wonderful feeling, because I realized that people in their 20s who have emerged from the fog of autism and are leading normal lives can continue to refine their skills and their personhood and continue to improve. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is John's experience in recovering from autism and who he is now. But we have something really special also to tell you, which is that Shelley Gallison, his former therapist — Shelley, stand up for 1 sec. John's former therapist, who treated John at Cedars-Sinai, is here today. So thank you all for coming in out of the rain. I think it'll be well worth your time to hear what John has to say. So I guess the first question for you, John, is what led you to write the book? And actually, let's just let's see. I'm not connected to anything. I just want to show everybody what the book looks like. It's a fascinating read, I think, and it'll be available. Is it already available in the bookstores, or available soon?
It's available soon in the bookstores, and it's online on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Okay, so tell us why you wrote the book.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming out in the rain. One of the principal reasons I wrote this book is that I wanted to really get the word out about my situation, but more so than that, giving hope to parents. Our son is autistic, and when I found out, when I got that diagnosis, it broke my heart. It ended my world right there. I felt absolutely hopeless, and I had gone through the situation I had gone through. And if I'd gone through the situation I'd gone through and had the progress I'd gone through, for me to feel absolutely hopeless and that it was the end of the world, made me really think about what it must be for parents that don't necessarily have the experience that I had. So I really wanted to get the word out. I wanted to create hope. Obviously, everyone that has autism is different, and everyone's outcomes are going to be different. But the main thing I wanted to really get out is that there is hope. These kids they're not dumb, they're not stupid, they're not relegated to a life sentence. All these kids have talent, all these kids can learn, and there is hope. So that was one of the main reasons I wrote the book. It was also important for me to write the book because it was a really cathartic experience for me. I had really been in denial about my own past for a very long time. And my mom passed away, and I felt that I just needed to write, and I did. And it was the best thing I could do. 3-4 years ago, I would not have shared this with some of my best friends. And writing it was just an amazing experience, and my clients and my friends and my family have all been very supportive, which has been great.
So it seems to me with that kind of an introduction, you probably now want us to establish that John really was autistic. And so that is something that's detailed in the book, but we're going to detail it for you now as well. So what was your original diagnosis, John?
It was severely autistic, and I'm sorry to use this term now, but this is the term that was used at the time in the 70s, slightly retarded. Obviously wasn't slightly retarded or disabled in that fashion, but I was autistic, and it's a question that I continue to ask my therapist, who is there to this day, because again, it's something I've always really been in denial with a lot of my life. I was very fortunate, but for the first many years of my life, I was I would stare at light switches and turn those light switches on for 3-4 hours at a time. Even until probably about 5-10 years ago, it was difficult for me to make eye contact with people. I was a lot better at it, but when I was a child, I wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. I would get in the elevator in our apartment complex down the street, actually, and there would be a big dog in the elevator, and it was like that dog wasn't even there. And when I started coming out of it, when I was in that elevator with the dog, I started getting scared of the dog. But for the first few years with that dog in that elevator, it was like that dog wasn't even there. I didn't want to have any sort of relationships. I didn't connect with my parents. I didn't really connect with anyone. I was really in my own world for the first several years of my life. And, I thank God, and I thank Shelley and my mom and all the people that helped me, that I could come out of wherever I was at. But when I did come out of wherever I was at, that's when a lot of the angst, a lot of the hard work really began, because I saw that I wasn't the same as other people.
How old were you and when you got the diagnosis, and who diagnosed you?
I was diagnosed a little before 2. I was diagnosed by, I was seen by Dr. Lovas at the time at UCLA, who's major pioneer of ABA treatment, and also doctors at Cedars-Sinai. So it was a relative consensus that at the very least that was going on with me.
So were you initially nonverbal, or did you always have language?
I was nonverbal. I started talking when I was 3.5. But yeah, I was nonverbal.
And did you have a desire to communicate? I'm not sure if that's even a fair question, but. Well,
I can't remember when I was 2 or before that really, but from what I can remember, no, I really didn't. I was very happy in my world. Even when I was 3 or 4, which I can remember to some extent, I was happy with who I was. I didn't think I was different, and I did my own thing. And yeah, if I was playing with the pots and pans for 3 hours, I was happy with that.
That, to me, was one of the most interesting aspects of the book, was your description of your world when you were a child, because you weren't anxious, you weren't unhappy. You said you had a sense of kind of pervasive calm when you would engage in self-stimulatory behavior. Can you tell them a little bit about all of that?
Yeah, it like I said, it was very normal for me to do what I did, and I thought of myself as a happy child. Now, my mom logged my whole childhood, my early childhood, and so I was able to see it from her perspective, and she certainly wasn't a very happy person at the time. But yeah, I was very happy with what I was doing, and when people would come in and want me to do certain things or talk or have to ask for a cookie or whatever it was, that was jarring to me. That was upsetting to me.
So you had kind of a rigidity about your routines and things that you didn't like other people to invade upon.
I didn't want to do anything different, if that makes any sense.
So what were you doing? How were you spending your time?
Well, I think initially it was, I would play with pots and pans. I would play with the light switch. I would flush the toilet. I loved playing with blocks. I would do that for very long periods of time, and even at Cedars, I was doing that quite a bit. And that, that's normal play. I mean, that's what a lot of children like to do. But I would do that for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and be very happy with it. I didn't need to talk to people or socialize with people or anything like that. For the first several years of my life, I didn't really want to have a lot to do with my mother. I really didn't want to play with her. I didn't want to interact with her. As I started coming out of the shell, I started wanting to be with her more and more.
So what age was that you felt like you started to come out?
Well, I started wanting to interact with her more, I would say, when I was about 3. But it wasn't until I was about 5 or 6 when I really felt like, okay, I want to kind of, do things with other kids and stuff like that.
There's a great passage in your book about your early mainstream experience, which you told me was in 1st grade, where you and your classmates are learning to read from a red, thin reader, and you realize for the first time that you're different. Can you talk about that experience?
Well, I didn't really know how to read in the first grade. That's the starting point of that. And I think I went to Roosevelt Elementary, which is here in Santa Monica, and the main difference I noticed is that I had the thin red reader, and everyone else had the thicker readers of some sort. And there was like a middle reader, and there was a really super thick reader for the smart kids. And I was in this red reader, and I was having a lot of trouble. That wasn't something that at Cedars that was really a focus. I mean, what the focus really had been in my early life was just getting me to a place where I could communicate and talk and ask for things and do stuff like that and interact with people appropriately to some extent. It wasn't about learning per se. So I was thrown into a first grade classroom, and I really, I wasn't prepared for it. Thank God I was thrown in that classroom, because that, I believe, besides the therapy I had at Cedars, that, I believe, changed my life. I would not be sitting here with you today if I had not been put in a mainstream classroom.
So why do you think, what's your reasoning when you say that it was so important for you to be mainstreamed at that age?
It wasn't important for me. I mean, I didn't really realize the difference, but I think it was so important because it actually gave me a shot. It gave me a shot to do what the other kids were doing, to learn like the other kids were learning. I mean, this was 1980-81, and special education, much as it is now to some extent, but not as much. I mean, that was just, a daycare classroom, essentially. I thank my lucky stars that my mom fought for that, and she had to fight for that.
So let's talk about that a little. So the first place you went to for treatment was at Cedars?
I was at UCLA with Dr. Lovas, and I was at Cedars as well.
Okay, how long were you at UCLA, and then how long were you at Cedars?
I think I was at Cedars from the point of 18 months until I did kindergarten there. So it was until I was 5 or 6.
And from what I understood, it was kind of a center-based program with a few other children where they gave you one-to-one or small group instruction of different sorts. Mm-hmm. And then tell us what you know about your mom's decision to try to mainstream you in a time when I don't think that was happening too much.
My mom, I think, was in absolute denial that she knew there was a lot wrong with me, but she was determined that I was not going to be autistic. She was absolutely determined that was not going to be the case, and she fought, and that was her personality, and in the terms of the way she fought, that was a good thing. In that, again, I wouldn't be where I am at today if it wasn't for her. On the other hand, she was jarring. It was a very jarring thing. I mean, she was very forceful about it, and she was just determined that this was the way it was going to be. And a lot of thought wasn't, and again, she was 200%, but a lot of thought wasn't necessarily given to, okay, we're putting this child in this classroom, and he doesn't know how to read yet, he doesn't maybe know how to count completely, stuff like that.
Did you have aid support in the classroom?
No.
So you were just thrown in?
I had a resource support where I think about an hour a day I would go to the special day class. But that was about it. Luckily, I had a great first grade teacher. Her name was Miss Savage. She just retired after 40 years at Roosevelt, and she was amazing. So,
were you ever in a special education class, or were you mainstreamed all the way through?
I was still in special ed until I think the eighth grade. That's
for resource, but you were always in a regular classroom with typical kids for most of the day.
Typically, I had speech pull-out. I had a reading therapist, stuff like that. When I was even through the 3rd grade, I wasn't making any eye contact, and I wasn't. I had speech issues as well, so I was in that environment.
So how are you functioning internally in this environment? How did you feel about going to school and just being thrown in?
I was a pretty happy kid. I have to say that when I was young. I mean, I did have loving parents. I was a pretty happy kid until about the 1st or 2nd grade.